Network 18. And you are watching CNN IBN.
Devil's Advocate with Karan Thapar up next. Before that, a look at the top stories. A Delhi court closes the 2-decade-old Bofors kickback case against a Gandhi family friend, Italian businessman Ottavio Cotrocchi. The BJP claims that the case was closed under government pressure. Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh accepts responsibility for the CVC fiasco, admits it's necessary to ensure that such incidents do not happen in the future. There's more trouble for Lalit Modi. The former IPL boss's passport is revoked by the government. Modi hits back by tweeting that he is a victim of the most corrupt government in Indian history.
Hello and welcome to a special Devil's Advocate. After the Supreme Court struck down PJ Thomas's appointment as CVC, how badly damaged is the government's credibility and how does it respond to the details of the judgment? That's with Congress spokesperson and MP Abhishek Singhvi and the BJP's leader of the opposition in the Rajya Sabha, Arun Jaitley. Gentlemen, let's start with the Supreme Court judgment quashing the appointment of PJ Thomas as CVC. Abhishek Singhvi, it's a grievous blow to the government which has seriously damaged its credibility. Can you deny that?
Certainly deny the nature of the adjectives used or the degree suggested by you. Obviously, a judgment which invalidates a government decision, and in this case not just any government decision but a decision of a high-powered committee, is a setback. In that sense, I do not deny it. But certainly the judgment reverses what it considers to be a legal error. It quashes, invalidates. It does not attribute anything personal, mala fide, ulterior motive or subjectivity to the persons comprised there. Indeed, it does not accept of the principles
Can I
and
interrupt?
intentions.
You questioned the. Can I interrupt?
You
questioned the adjectives I used. Your colleague in government, Sultan Ahmed, the Minister of State for Tourism, calls the judgment an indictment. That's stronger language than I used.
Well, certainly he is entitled to use what he likes. I am using what I think is the correct word because I am telling you not on subjectivity or adjectives. I am giving you on merits.
Okay.
This is a judgment which has to be respected, accepted. It is an invalidation. It was a bona fide error. It should not have happened, but having happened, it is not something which is involving any personal attributes or attribution of any mala fide, etc.
All right, that's your estimation of what you think the judgment amounts to. Arun Jaitley, on the other hand, the Supreme Court struck down Thomas's appointment on the grounds that it violates institutional integrity. But given that the Supreme Court itself has frequently violated its own institutional integrity as well as that of the wider judiciary by forcing through inappropriate judicial appointments, isn't there something hypocritical about this order?
Well, I don't think I'm in a position to comment at this stage about what the Supreme Court does or does not do, because that's not a subject matter of current debate today. And even if some judicial appointments have been inappropriately made, does that entitle the Prime Minister or the Home Minister of this country, sitting as a majority of two in a high-powered committee, to subvert the institution of the CVC by not what is called just a technical or a legal error, but a monumental lapse on part of the government? The monumental lapse being that integrity is vital to the institution of a CVC. And if the integrity quotient is not even a relevant factor in the mind of the Prime Minister of this country and the mind of the Home Minister of this country in making the appointment of a CVC, it's a huge, monumental and a moral lapse.
Abhishek Singhvi, the second embarrassment for the government is that all the arguments made by your law officers in front of the Supreme Court were one by one almost embarrassingly rejected. To begin with, the Attorney General attempted to devalue the criterion of impeccable integrity. That was rubbished by the Supreme Court. He then suggested that a charge sheet was not a stigma. That too was rejected. Finally, he said that once a person had been cleared by the CVC to become a secretary, he could be impaneled without further clearances. That too was rubbished. This is quite embarrassing. It's a monumental wholesale rebuffing.
Let's put it in perspective, Karan. In any system, you have arguments, submissions made before a court, and the verdict comes ex post facto. When you are making submissions, you don't concede the point on which you are making submissions, otherwise there will be no adjudication. It happens in every case. The only difference is this is a high-powered post and a high-powered committee, so there is so much talk about it. When you are making submissions, you make them with the understanding that you will win.
Okay.
The court holds otherwise. But just consider what the court did not hold. Just give me half a minute, it's very important. The court did not accept the counter suggestion made repeatedly that only a unanimity is necessary.
Yeah, I'll come to that later. I'm interrupting you. I'll come to that later. Let's take things one by one. I'll come to that later, Abhishek. I'll come to that later, I promise you. But let's take things one by one. Arun Jaitley, on the other hand, this case against Thomas has been hanging fire since 1999. That's almost 12 years. It's only a couple of months ago that the trial itself has begun to start. How long must this sword of Damocles hang over the poor man? After all, he could end up being innocent, and yet he's already paid a terrible price.
Well, that is a natural consequence of the judicial and the legal process that we have. Investigations take time. When sanctions are not given for years, that itself contributes to the delay. At times, the influence of the officer concerned adds to the delay because he is able to manage a system where sanctions are not granted. Thirdly, some accused moves the court and obtains a stay of the proceeding. That itself contributes to the delays. Therefore, the legal system and the actions of the petitioners themselves constituting delay can't really be held to their advantage to say he is now a poor man. He or his co-accused file a petition as a result of which delays are caused. Therefore, delay should itself vindicate the man.
All right, gentlemen, let's come now to some of the critical details of that judgment. Abhishek Singhvi, first of all, the judgment makes it clear that even on the question of individual integrity, P.J. Thomas doesn't get a clean chit. The judgment points out that there were at least 6 instances when the Department of Personnel and Training noted in the files that penalty proceedings must start against Thomas. And then it says, and I'm quoting, even on personal integrity, the HPC has not considered the relevant material. That is embarrassing for the Prime Minister and the Home Minister.
I must point out 3 things. Firstly, one of the persons intervening, or the petitioner, Mr. Lingdo, a man of impeccable credentials, himself said that we do not hold anything personal against Mr. Thomas, and we do not consider him to be personally lacking integrity. Secondly, the judgment specifically notes that we are giving no opinion on the person's guilt or integrity. What they said was that this aspect was not considered.
Okay, and third?
The whole judgment is based on consideration.
And third?
And third, I only wish that allegations of malafide had been made in the petition at all. Mr. Prashant Bhushan has made no personal allegations of malafide against any of the 2 people, the Prime Minister or Mr. Chidambaram.
All right.
And therefore none were found. And indeed, they were not pressed or argued.
Okay.
And none of the words used here were used in the judgment.
Okay, but that still doesn't deny the sentence that I quoted, that even on personal integrity, the HPC has not considered relevant material. Arun Jaitley, let me come to you. On the other hand, Arun Jaitley, the same judgment also makes it clear that when the CVC gave clearance to Thomas at the time when he became a secretary to the government, the CVC itself wasn't aware of the DOPT noting. Secondly, Pratyush Sinha, a former CVC, has told the Hindustan Times today that when he cleared Thomas as Chief Secretary Kerala, he had no idea Thomas was charge sheeted. Doesn't all of that clearly suggest that it's the system that's at fault, not the Prime Minister and the Home Minister personally?
Well, I don't think the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are entitled to the benefit of the doubt. System is constituted of men. And if men are in a position to manage things to an extent that a CVC is not even aware of the pendency of a case, then we must really attribute some kind of an influence to the people concerned. Otherwise, in the normal course of happening, this would not have happened.
Okay.
As far as the Prime Minister and the Home Minister are concerned, the crucial question they have to tell us, like Pratyush Sinha, were they aware of the pendency of this case, or were they kept in the dark?
All right.
If they were indeed aware of the pendency of the case, I think their guilt, their culpability, and their legal malafide all the more increases in this.
All right, but that, of course, we have to leave till the Prime Minister or the Home Minister clarify the answer to your question. In the meantime, Abhishek Singhvi, the bigger point made by the Supreme Court is that in appointing Thomas CVC, the government failed to protect the image and the integrity of the Central Vigilance Commission. And I'm going to quote the relevant sentence from the judgment. If by that touchstone the candidate stands disqualified, then it shall be the duty of the HPC not to recommend such a candidate. The government violated that critical constitutional duty.
Well, certainly there was an error, which is why the judgment has come, and now there is a quietus to that aspect. But I must remind you that possibly, and this, we are not re-arguing it, we are not reviewing it, but possibly it is understandable, and that's why I call it a bona fide error, because both the NDA, Mr. Jaitley's government, and the UPA had denied sanction for the prosecution of this man. And secondly, the CVC had cleared him for empanelment for this post. It may have been possible that the people thought that they have to look only at material before them, since everything prior has been seen by the CVC
except
in the clearance.
Can I
The man
point out?
was cleared, right or wrong, and that's obviously an error now. I'm not supporting
Okay, but
it.
can I point out that your explanation is
one
one that the Supreme Court specifically rejects? Now, Arun Jaitley, this is
Correct.
not the first time that an unsuitable person has been appointed to a critical post. Your government appointed Justice Anand despite the serious allegations around him as head of the Human Rights Commission. You also appointed Prabhat Kumar as governor of Jharkhand. The only difference is that the Supreme Court didn't go into those matters and issues. This time the Supreme Court did intervene.
Well, I don't think I'm going to accept your word as far as a reference to a former Chief Justice is concerned, because somebody has to adjudicate those allegations and make a comment on them. We still aren't a banana republic where anchors become judges over judges and say, well, I have pronounced him guilty. That's not the system that we live in, Karan Thapar.
Except for the fact that Ram Jethmalani broke with your government over this issue. Have you forgotten?
That's all right. He broke with the government, but somebody has to adjudicate and give a finding of guilt. There has to be a pendency of a charge sheet. You can't have Ram Jethmalani and Karan Thapar saying, I pronounce him guilty, and therefore the person is held guilty. That's not the system we live in.
That's a fair point.
The moment there was an allegation against Prabhat Kumar, he had to quit as a governor. That was also during our government.
All right.
Don't forget that.
Abhishek Singhvi, let me ask the question. The worst part is that this government could have avoided the fiasco it today has to face up to if it had only heeded Sushma Swaraj's advice to delay the appointment by 24 hours so that you could investigate the true status of Thomas. It seems to me that you've compounded your original error of judgment with arrogance and obstinacy as well.
Not at all. We can all be wise by hindsight, and if we were all wise by hindsight in the beginning, then there'd be no need for adjudication. But I cannot help reminding you that although the examples you gave are one set, you should have given the examples of them reappointing with Laddus Mr. Yedurappa in Karnataka after 2,000-page report of the Lokayukt. That's a more apposite example, and also equally apposite are other examples of the Defence Minister, Mr. Fernandes, under a commission of inquiry, before he is exonerated, being reappointed as Defence Minister.
All right.
Those are egregious examples. We have bowed down to the Supreme Court judgment.
I'm not going to let you hijack this discussion now. I want to stop you there. Forgive me.
I would like to respond to that.
Very quickly.
Abhishek Singhvi is being very economical with the truth and very lavish with falsehood. Which is the 2,000-page report of the Lokayukt. At least I have not come across any such report unless Abhishek has invented it. I have only seen press statements of the Lokayukt. As far as Mr. Fernandes is concerned, we are now 10 years down in history, and the first allegation against George Fernandes is still to be established or even a stateable allegation made. It was more political propaganda than any allegation of substance.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to interview, and you've both had your say on that point. Arun Jaitley, what about something else? This is the point that Abhishek Singhvi wanted to raise earlier, but I stopped him. The Supreme Court has rejected the BJP position that because the leader of the opposition was part of the high-powered committee that made the appointment, therefore the appointment should have been by unanimity rather than majority. The Supreme Court simply hasn't bought that argument. Isn't that a little bit of a setback for you?
hardly a setback, it's a legal position. The argument raised by Mrs. Sushma Swaraj was, you have prepared a panel of 3 names. There is one out of the 3 who has a stigma against him. Therefore, out of the other 2, please appoint any one of those 2. It is in that context the argument was raised.
All right,
the petitioners before the Supreme Court argued that the principle of majority should not apply and it should be consensus. The Supreme Court has laid down the law, and I feel it's correctly laid down the law, which says that you can't simply go by saying it should be a unanimity under all circumstances. A dissent must also be informed by reason, and the overruling of dissent must also be informed by reason.
Absolutely.
Therefore, the test of reasonableness must apply to a decision of this kind.
But
the BJP had no personal interest. The BJP had no personal interest in the majority principle. We were more concerned with the ethics of the issue rather than the legalism.
Yes, but in fact, the important point, and I'm going to end this part by repeating this, that the Supreme Court has actually said that a majority decision is ethical and correct, because to give one person a right of veto is not what was intended in the original act itself. Let's come back and talk now about the political consequences of what many consider a bombshell breaking on the government. That's in a moment's time. See you after the break.
Aditya Birla Group, taking India to the world.
MP अजब है, अरे सबसे गजब है, संगमरमर खुदता नहीं, छूटा आसमान है, और साची देता सबको शांति का फरमान है। MP अजब है, अरे सबसे गजब है।
Faces I see every day, everywhere. Fake plastic smiles and endless stares.
Make others invisible. Stand apart with body deodorants from Park Avenue.
Hyundai believes there is a difference between making cars and making cars that make a difference. Every moment you experience the wonder created by Hyundai, expect to hear this sound. Hyundai, new thinking, new possibilities.
इंडिया, जीत हमारे साथ इंडिया, दिल पे रख दो हाथ इंडिया, धक धक गो इंडिया गो, हीरो होंडा गो इंडिया गो, धक धक गो इंडिया गो, हीरो होंडा गो इंडिया गो, धक धक गो इंडिया गो, इंडिया गो।
Comfortable radio.
Nearly 2 million children die each year from diseases that are preventable. Regular immunizations, a nutritious meal, or just clean drinking water is what ensures that a child like Girish lives longer. At Save the Children, we know how to save children's lives, but we need your help to make it possible. Call now to donate on 022-4272-7272. Your call can help bring this change.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful
Connecting you every way and always. SL Wi-Fi.
This is Network 18. And you are watching CNN IBN.
Welcome back to a special Devil's Advocate with Arun Jaitley and Abhishek Singhvi on the bombshell that broke over the government yesterday. Gentlemen, let's come to the political consequences of the Supreme Court decision. Abhishek Singhvi, the Prime Minister has said that he accepts responsibility. He says we are at fault. But given that this was a grievous error, some would say a deliberate error, shouldn't either the Prime Minister or the Home Minister offer to resign? Would that not be the morally correct thing to do?
Absolutely and totally not. That is the reason I said this word deliberately is wrong. In fact, this is precisely what either Mr. Prashant Bhushan or Mrs. Sushma Swaraj should have intervened to say, ascribing motives. They would have made them party, made malafide allegations. And you are right. The moment there is any motive found in a malafide sense, then there will be a very serious thing.
Okay.
The court has not used any of these words.
Well, the court may not have,
after a court judgment.
But the court of public opinion has used these words.
Let me complete. Yes, the court of public opinion, unfortunately or fortunately, doesn't function according to what you formulate on a TV channel. This is a court of public opinion which is formulated when you have a 2009 general elections and a 2014 elections, and certainly there are.
What about something else? What about something else? This is a grievous error. Shouldn't the Prime Minister or the Home Minister at least apologize? If you're not prepared to resign, at least apologize to the nation.
These are only gradations and degrees of trying to politicize an event, Karan, and you know that well. This is an error. In fact, innumerable judgments of a government are reversed by courts every day. This, of course, falls in a different category because the high-powered committee consists of high-powered persons. But otherwise,
this is a monumental error. This is a monumental error. You're trying to minimize it. It's a monumental error.
Adjectives. Yeah, well, fortunately, these nice adjectives were not used by the court when it invalidated. The courts do use those words, but the courts have not used them.
All right.
And what is happening is you are reviewing a judgment, rewriting it, or rather our political
I'm not reviewing a judgment. I am asking whether the government and the Prime Minister is prepared to apologize to the nation for a grievous error, and you're saying to me the answer is no. Arun Jaitley, on the other hand, and this is equally surprising to people, is that the BJP is not demanding any resignations whatsoever. Were you to do so, you'd probably have popular support behind you, yet instead, you're strangely silent. How do you account for this peculiar, strange silence?
We are not silent on the issue. We've asked two very pertinent questions. The first question is, Mr. Prime Minister, please tell us, were you misled or did you choose to mislead yourself? The second question is, were you aware of the fact that there is a case pending against Mr. Thomas when you recommended his appointment? The Prime Minister and the Prime Minister alone must answer on this question.
But forgive me, you know the answer to the second question. Sushma Swaraj made the Prime Minister aware that there was a case. Despite that, the Prime Minister insisted on going ahead.
Well,
she asked the Prime Minister for a 24-hour delay. Even that was not granted. So now ask for resignation.
Mrs. Sushma Swaraj also says when she pointed out the case, the third person present in the meeting said that the case is over. Therefore, let's not go by this. Let's hear from the Prime Minister on the subject. He can't hide behind the silence. And therefore,
but the important thing is you're not demanding a resignation. You're not demanding a resignation.
If necessary, we will do that. But let the answer to these two questions come. And I don't think politics ends with today's calendar. It's an ongoing process. Let the answer come. You'll hear of our next step.
All right. The BJP says that depending upon what the Prime Minister says when he makes his promise statement to Parliament, you will possibly ask for a resignation at that point. Last question to you, Abhishek Singhvi. After 2G, CWG, ISRO, Devas and Adarsh, this is one further damning element of scandal and bad handling that's broken on the government. Today, many people think that both your government and the PM in particular are irretrievably damaged.
It depends very much on your perspective of looking and whether you're looking as an opposition or otherwise. Yes, the list which you have recited shows one other thing. It shows that as allegations emerge, if there is credibility, this government takes concrete action at multiple fora. it takes concrete, punitive, coercive and corrective action.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much to correct. You have to do it at multiple fora. It's rather sad that the government is constantly correcting itself.
1 second. But no action was taken when you had the equal litany of Tehelka, of land scam,
I'm going to end this show. I'm going to leave you the last word. You've been sadly in the dock. It's only fair that you should have the last word, pointing out that the BJP didn't, as you say, behave equally as you have. My thanks to both Arun Jaitley and Abhishek Singhvi for joining me for this special Devil's Advocate. And if you have been, thanks for watching. Goodbye. Good night.
Wow, I know. And it can record videos too. Look.
Peter! You cheat! What about our child?
Oh my gosh, what's this? Super smooth touch.